If a little green is good, more is even better. Now, back to Green is Good with John Shigarian and Mike Brady.
Welcome back to Green is Good. And if you thought the first half of our show with Trek bikes was great, well, the second half is just going to be just as wonderful, Mike. We're going to be talking about aluminum, but there's so many issues that aluminum ties to that I think it's going to blow our listeners away.
Well, again, at the top of the show, you brought in a prop, which you were out shopping the other night,
yeah.
And it looks very familiar. Can I see that for just a second?
Sure.
Yeah. It's a standard aluminum foil, Reynolds aluminum foil, Reynolds wrap, trusted since 1947. And there it is. It looks like a typical box to about a third of the way over. It's got the blue and white logo, but then the rest of it is green. It's got a pretty picture of a little tree, and it says new, foil from 100% recycled aluminum.
And we just hung up the phone with Eric Borling from Trek Bikes, and he just told us they make their bikes from 100% recycled steel. So recycling metals is the future.
It really makes such a difference, too, because we think about, well, what's the big deal about recycling? Well, you think about the energy that it takes to mine the materials, the raw material from the earth.
Stop there, Mike.
Yeah.
You brought up a great point right there that most people don't understand. What you just said is such a subtle but important point. Mining the natural resources versus recycling all metals, steel, aluminum, gold, platinum, copper. You save at least 50 or more % energy by recycling metals as opposed to mining it from natural resources.
Well, and people think, John, okay, but that's great, but what about people whose jobs are in mining? Well, there's mining and manufacturing, okay? There, with every creation of new product or new technology. For example, you have built a business in the recycling business. So how many people that were doing other things or unemployed are now working for you every day?
Hundreds of employees. So new industries are created, old industries are reinvented, and that's part of the evolution of our planet and the evolution of industry. But recycling metals is the future, and we're so lucky today because we have one of the the leaders of Alcoa on with us, which is one of the great aluminum brands in the world. And the issue that you brought up, Mike, it ties. It's just not a landfill issue, which is important.
No,
and it's just not an aluminum issue. It ties to all metals. It's an energy issue too, which affects all of us on this planet. So landfills affect all of us. All metals affect all of us, and energy, which is one of our greatest and most complex issues of our modern times. This ties back to the energy issue, which you just brought up.
Well, I am thinking about that semi-selfishly because what would I rather do if I could keep my energy costs down and running my home? And I'm thinking about another triple-digit summer here in the Central Valley in California. Would I rather have my energy bills go down because fewer kilowatt hours are going to the manufacture of material that is already at hand could be used more efficiently and take less energy to repurpose and recycle? I'm for that.
And so am I. And that's the great the great part of Green is Good, our show, and the issues that we tackle every week, Mike, with regards to sustainability and what you and I think are doing, and more as we wander around, is tying together the whole issue, the three critical issues of people, planet, and profits, and show how they all are connected and interrelate on a day-to-day basis.
Well, I think we're going to have a fascinating second half, so if you're ready,
come on back for Greg Wittbecker at Alcoa at Green is Good.
If a little green is good, more is even better. Now, back to Green is Good with John Shigarian and Mike Brady.
Welcome back to Green is Good, and we're so honored today to have Greg Wittbecker, who's the Director of Primary Aluminum Analysis and Recycling from Alcoa, on our show today. Greg has a long history. I could probably take the next 21 minutes to describe his history in metals and metals recycling. I'm not going to do that. Greg, welcome to Green is Good, and thank you for joining. You have such an important role in the whole green revolution and the sustainability movement. thank you for being on the show and sharing with us everything that Alcoa is doing towards the recycling and sustainability and green revolution movements.
Well, thanks, John. It's a pleasure to be with you and just share some of our views on all of the exciting things that are going on in recycling right now. And it really is a great time to be in the recycling business because, people nationwide really do have significantly raised their passion for this subject, and we're just excited to be able to talk about all of the different things we got going on.
Well, let's talk about that. Mike, the show goes around the world, so we want to talk a little bit about the around the world approach first. What does the aluminum can recycling rate in the United States look like as opposed to other countries right now or other areas around the world?
Well, in the U.S. right now, we're recycling about 54% of all the cans that are consumed in the U.S. That's slightly less than the global average, which is about 69%.
Oh.
We do have quite a significant variation, by country, and in some cases there are some very, pragmatic reasons for that. For example, Japan has an extremely high recycling rate, well over 90%.
Wow.
But of course, the Japanese being ever pragmatic, they live on an island. It's a small place, and the Japanese very quickly realized that they had to become, really good stewards of what land they had. So it's not a surprise to us that the Japanese lead the world or are amongst the world leaders. But the U.S. recycling rate is actually very comparable to what you see, in Europe. I mean, individual countries in Europe are slightly higher than the U.S., but generally we're pretty comparable to the Western European experience.
Great. So, why don't you share? Let's go to the base issue. What are the benefits of recycling and recycling aluminum cans more specifically?
Well, aluminum, as the audience may know, is a fairly energy-intensive product to make, John. But by recycling aluminum, we can save a significant amount of energy, through the recycling process.
Well, we talked a little bit about that on the intro. Why don't you give the wow number, Greg, on what % of energy is saved as opposed to making aluminum cans from virgin ore and making them out of recycled aluminum?
We can save about 95% of the cost to make aluminum product from virgin material. And I always find it interesting to give people some context because obviously people always say to me, well, what 95% of what? And here's an interesting statistic.
Okay.
The energy you would save in recycling 1 ton of aluminum would provide enough electricity savings to allow the typical American household to run their home for 15 months.
Unbelievable.
A lot of electricity. And, when people talk about, gee, what can I do to help the environment? We always say recycling aluminum is a really simple thing to do, and you can get a direct economic benefit that hits the bottom line.
Greg, let me ask you one question. You said, I want to make sure I got the numbers right because I like to quote stuff like this to friends and family. So recycling a ton of aluminum cans or any aluminum saves enough energy so that a typical American household could get 15 months worth of electricity?
That's right. That's
okay.
Right.
It's
a pretty astonishing number.
So Greg, you're on the show today, and even though you represent an amazing brand, Alcoa, which, by the way, for our listeners out there who after the show get so inspired about what Greg's sharing with you today, look at his 2 websites, alcoa.com and alcoarecycling.com. Both are really wonderfully done and great websites. Greg, though, this goes way beyond just metals, though, you're saying. The issue of recycling and recycling aluminum is also an energy issue, you're saying.
Absolutely. I mean, all recycled materials, save varying amounts of electricity. Aluminum happens to be one of the more prominent examples, but even recycling, plastic bottles, paper, and glass save energy. And I mean, all of us as individuals are aware of the, we've gone through these energy, bubbles, and energy prices have been very expensive. It just stands to reason that if we could conserve energy consumption, it might help to, mitigate price increases in energy. So recycling is a very good way to try to reduce energy consumption. And of course, we're all well aware of the ongoing discussion about global warming and our carbon footprints. And recycling is a very easy way for the average person to have an immediate impact on their carbon footprint. If you recycled all those aluminum cans and saved all that electricity generation, you would effectively be reducing the carbon footprint, of that individual.
So that's a great point. So there's a landfill benefit. We're not filling up the landfills. There's an energy benefit, which then, simple solution, recycling cans, leads to, complex problems can get solved by that. The energy problem, which is very complex, as you well know, can be partially solved by something as simple as recycling cans.
Yeah, and John, one of the things that we've been on record for about 2 years ago, stating a pretty ambitious stretch goal. I mentioned earlier our recycling rate's about 54%.
Right.
And we went on record quite publicly 2 years ago and said we wanted to raise the rate to 75% by the year 2015.
Right.
And people said, wow, that's a pretty ambitious goal. Has it ever been that high? And we said, well, no. The highest it's ever been has been 68%. But you've got to have a stretch goal out there,
right,
to really give people some understanding of how important it is to really do this. So.
We agree. So tell our listeners, and tell Mike and I, what is Alcoa doing to reach that stretch goal? Give us some of the simple steps that you're doing right now that can get the United States to that goal.
Well, I think from having spent an awful lot of time, visiting with the average person on the street, I think the number one comment we get from people is, it's just not very convenient to recycle. I don't know where to go to recycle. What can I do? And so one of the first things that we focused our efforts on is trying to provide an element of convenience to people so that to recycle is as convenient as simple as finding, a wastebasket or a trash can somewhere. We always like to point out to people that when you walk into a room or you walk into a business, you would be shocked if there was not a trash receptacle in that room or in that facility. And our long-term vision is there ought to be a recycling bin everywhere you see a trash can.
You're right.
So convenience is important, and one of the things that we've done over the course of the last 3 years is distribute at absolutely no cost nearly 100,000 plastic recycling bins, nationwide. We've done this in 19 different states up until 2010, and in 2010 we're hoping to expand to as many as 30 states. And we're working with local state recycling organizations to provide bins that just provide people the ability to have something to throw it away into and take to recycling centers. We've also worked with quite an innovative concept that was pioneered by a company called Recyclebank, which you may have heard of.
They've been a guest on our show. Ron Gonen, the president's been a guest on our show.
Well, we have a wonderful working relationship with Ron's company and have actually worked in Phoenix, in Houston, in Philadelphia, and a number of other demonstration projects where they've set up these rewards-based programs, and in every single case, the program has been a phenomenal success. Where they've launched the pilots, the recycling rates have gone up enormously, and the reason is very simple. You give people a convenient way to do it, and people will respond and do the right thing.
You're right. So convenience, you're saying, is a common theme to making the recycling rates in the United States get higher.
That's right. And the other thing is we do have to develop more infrastructure in the system to process these materials and make it cost-effective for these materials to be recovered. I mean, recycling is, in its own right, as an environmental objective, is a great thing to do, but it has to be run like a business, and we look at it as another form of business.
Well, and you're right, and so, but I'm just going to refer to some of these wow facts that Mike and I found on your great website. Thanks for Recycling is one of these wow facts. In 1972, 53 million pounds of aluminum cans were recycled. Today, that amount is exceeded by 1.6 million pounds, 1,612 million pounds of. So the rates are just going. You guys have really done a brilliant job of helping to encourage the United States recycle aluminum. Another one: Americans earn about $1 billion a year recycling aluminum cans. So you could earn money recycling and encouraging other people to recycle.
Well, we're biased, of course, because we're in the aluminum industry, John. But we always like to say that aluminum is the recycling champion in terms of helping to drive the recycling of a whole host of materials. I mean, aluminum and steel and metallics are typically less than 10% of the stream of materials that go through a typical curbside recycling system.
Right.
But they generate over 40% of the revenue.
Okay. So you bring
aluminum is really what helps power the success of not just can recycling, but paper and glass and all these other materials, benefit as well.
You're right. So I want to stop on that point, because that's a great point that you just made, Greg. So aluminum is the champion. Explain then to Mike and I and our listeners what is the infinite recyclable package that aluminum is, so we understand how this can keep getting recycled, and what does infinite recyclable mean?
Well, because of the basic nature of metals, and specifically aluminum, we have a very unique package in that the typical aluminum can that an individual recycles today will be back on the shelf as a new beverage in 60 days or less. Unlike some of the other materials that are recycled, our cans have the ability to go right back to our facilities in the United States, where we process 100% of the material we collect in the U.S. is processed in the United States, generating U.S. jobs. And those cans get remade back into aluminum can sheet, which goes right back into another aluminum can. So these used beverage containers literally are just spinning endlessly, going right back into the same primary application from whence they came, which, some of the other materials that are recycled today actually go through what we call sort of a down cycle, where they do get recycled, but they go into other sort of secondary applications. For example, PET bottles are often used to make carpet fiber, which is great that they're getting recycled and being used in a secondary application. But then, that carpet fiber doesn't necessarily get recycled, an infinite number of times. Our product just keeps going around, literally endlessly.
So infinitely recyclable is just another great term for cradle to cradle.
Right. We always like to say that the aluminum can was probably it's now celebrating its 50th anniversary, but it was probably the original cradle-to-cradle product.
There you go.
Even before, John McDonough, came up with the whole science behind cradle-to-cradle and how to use these products in an infinitely recyclable fashion.
So that is so great. So people out there who are listening, the more you recycle your cans, the more they're going to be recycled into just more cans that you're going to be able to enjoy your favorite drink from.
And one of the things that we always like to say to people, people have a tendency, John, to get a little bit overwhelmed by the whole thing about climate change,
sure.
carbon footprint, and
sure.
What can I do to help deal with this? And I mean, recycling an aluminum can is about the most basic thing you can do. When we set out to achieve this goal of 75% recycling, which is a lot of metal. I mean, don't get me wrong. We have to really get a lot more metal back in order to achieve that goal.
Right.
But when we started to break it down and look at the number of cans that were still out there unclaimed, and the number of people in our country, we said, if everybody in the country would literally recycle one more can a week, we'd make the 75% goal. So it's kind of like the old adage when we were all kids, where our mothers made us, take vitamins every day and do certain things every day. In this case, we said, a can a week is all we need to get to that goal. And that's something that the average person can say, that's not too big of a thing to ask.
That is so true, Greg. I mean, it's like the almond industry. They say Blue Diamond almonds, a can a week, that's all we ask. Well, doing that, recycling one more can, I think anybody that is listening right now, if they were to think about one can, just how simple a goal that would be. And, it really started way back in the 70s. You're so right about the aluminum recycling really being the engine that drove recycling into people's consciousness. And at the top of the show, when we're talking with you, you use the word people are more passionate about recycling. And I think that is a very good point, Greg, because people have really embraced the recycling idea. It's become part of our collective DNA.
Well, I think that's a very good point. We actually have a tagline that we came up with to try to symbolize what we were after in terms of that messaging we wanted. And we said, recycling, make it second nature. We wanted people to do this.
That's great.
As an instinctive thing, kind of like turning off the lights at night when they went to bed. You consume a beverage, and obviously we'd like it to be aluminum, but even if it's in a plastic bottle or a glass bottle, we just want people to recycle it because it's the right thing to do, and to do it just really second nature.
Hey, Greg, unfortunately, we're down to the last couple of minutes here, 2 minutes or so. What if someone wants more information about aluminum can recycling, where should they go? Because we want our listeners to, get involved here and to be part of the solution and partner up with Alcoa. And really, we get like you've said and my partner says all the time, small steps can lead to big solutions and big change. So why don't you share with our listeners, where can they go to find more information?
Well, a good place to start, John, would be to go to our website, which is alcoarecycling.com. The audience will find a whole host of different hyperlinks there to other partners of ours that will tell them where they can take materials to be recycled if they don't have curbside collection in their particular communities. There's a lot of fun facts there on energy savings and different things that show how important recycling is to saving the environment. And they can also, interact with us through our blog, sending us things about, what things they're doing in their local community. They can also go to alcoa.com and send us, information about things they're doing in their community, and also to request bins and educational materials directly from us, and also from time to time we're all over the country, visiting with people and making presentations.
Well, Greg Wittbecker, Mike Brady and I are so thankful and honored that you came on our show today and shared all the wonderful initiatives that Alcoa is working towards to make our place and our world a better place to live in. We just want to thank you for your words of inspiration, for your solutions that you provided to our listeners. And Greg Wittbecker, you are living proof that green is good.
Thank you.
This program will be available for downloading in a couple of days from our station's website, keyword podcast. Thanks for listening, and join us again next week at the same time for another edition of Green is Good.